Good evening, Rabbi. Tonight we're going to talk about a very interesting topic, which is in Hebrew we call this Yuhara. Yuhara. A lot of people don't know about this word, what it means, Yuhara. Yuhara means to be conceited. Conceit. Titguloba, a person who's, yeah. And there's also another word in Hebrew for that, Gava. A person who's shows off. He likes to show off. He likes to make a big show. He likes to show himself that he's smart or he's whatever, he's big or whatever it is, right? So in order to explain this concept, we're going to talk, there's a Gemara. There's a Gemara in Baba Kama, Pei Aleph Amud Bet. It says over there that Rabbi Yuhara Nasi and Rabbi Chia, two big Chachamim of the generation, they were walking together in the street, and they were the Gedolei Ador. What does that mean? They were the great rabbis of that generation, these two. Big Chachamim. So all of a sudden, they see in front of them one guy, acting very strange. So this guy, what is he doing? He's walking in the street, and he's like jumping, jumping over. Boom, jump, like hopping. He's hopping over. So Rabbi Yuhara Nasi looks at this guy, and he asks Rabbi Chia, who's his friend. He says, who is this person who's showing in front of us Gedula? You know what that means, Gedula? Like largeness, like bigness. That he wants to look big in front of us. He wants to be conceited, in other words. So he says, really he deserves to be excommunicated, this guy. Right? So what does this mean, to be excommunicated for what? So there's a rule like this, in the Chazal. The rabbis, the sages, have made a decree that a person is not allowed to act in a conceited way. This is one of the decrees of the sages. It's just it's bad behavior. Can you close that door? I'm sorry, there's music coming through there. So it's like poor behavior, and so to give you a little background, what the story was over there. Why was it considered to be conceited that he's jumping around like that? Like some kind of a grasshopper. So the story goes like this, right? That when Yeshua ben Nun, he brought the Jewish people into the Eretz Israel. Yeshua ben Nun was the Talmid of Moshe Rabbeinu. He was the one who brought them into Eretz Israel. So Yeshua ben Nun, he made it several decrees when he came in the land. And those decrees were considered to be like important decrees in order that the land, they should be able to live in the land in an orderly fashion. Right? So one of the decrees that he made was that a person doesn't have to walk in the middle of the street, like in the middle of the road. He can walk on the sidewalk. So then what's the big deal about that? What's the big deal? In those days there was no cars, We're not talking about that. So then what do we care if it's on the sidewalk, in the street, whatever? So the point was like this, right? The sidewalk was private property, and the street was public property. So really a person should not be trespassing and walking on private property. You have no right to do that. So what happened was that in order to avoid that, you have to walk in the street. But the problem is when you walk in the street, there's an issue over there. Right? As we said, in those days there was no cars. So then what was the issue? So the issue was that there was like holes, like potholes in the street. Like today we have also. Go to Manhattan, you'll see. Right, those potholes over there. So what happened was that those potholes, you had to jump over them, like they were like all over the place. Like craters, little craters.
Yeah.
So you gotta jump, boom, boom, jump. So this guy, that's what he was doing. He was jumping over them. That's why he was jumping around like a grasshopper. So when Yeshua ben Nun saw that this was a problem, what he did was he made a decree. What was the decree? That even though when you walk on the sidewalk, you're trespassing in private property. Today, by the way, it's not like that, right? When you walk on the sidewalk, it's still public property. So it's okay.
Right.
But in that situation over there, the sidewalk was already private property, So you had to walk in the street, number one, or number two, to trespass. So Yeshua ben Nun, he made a decree. You know what he said? He said, we're going to allow people to trespass and to walk on the sidewalk. Even though they're trespassing, But in order to avoid walking with those holes, those craters, those potholes, we have no choice but to allow that. So what do? They made a decree that people are allowed to walk on the sidewalk, even though they're trespassing. That's what he did. So okay, it sounds very nice, sounds beautiful, right? So I want you to understand this a little bit, right? What that means. That the Bet Din, we talked about this before, right? The authority of the rabbis have authority, So one of the authorities that the rabbis have, that we find in the halakha, is that they have power to confiscate property of somebody and give it to somebody else if they feel that that person wronged him, he stole something from him, right? Whatever. So they're allowed to confiscate and hand it over to the other party because they know that this is the right thing to do. So the Bet Din has power to confiscate from people.
Sounds like the Democrats.
Lehavdil, right? So what does that mean? That if you're guilty of something, they can confiscate your property and you have to pay. You have to, you gotta pay whatever you gotta pay. If you're guilty, you gotta pay. You gotta pay up. So what happens like this, right? That this is the reason why the rabbis were able to do this. In other words, I'm confiscating your property and saying that you can walk on the sidewalk even though I'm trespassing. But since there's no choice, in order to make the life livable, the public life livable, we have no choice but to confiscate your property. So what does that mean, confiscate? We're not confiscating it altogether, just in the sense that you can walk there, you can trespass. That's the idea, So you can't be arrested for trespassing on the sidewalk over there. That's the whole idea. Even though technically speaking you could be, according to the Torah you could be, but the rabbi said, no, not going to be like that. So what happens is that now, all of a sudden, that means that for many years already, Yoshua bin Nun, we're talking about already, how long ago was Yoshua bin Nun? This was right after Moshe Rabbeinu, right? So we're talking about at least 1,200 years ago. Yoshua bin Nun. 1,500 years ago, whatever it was, right? A long time ago. This is not yesterday. Yeah. So, am I saying it right? Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm not saying it right. It's not 1,200. It's much more than that.
Yes.
Why is that? Because we're in Galut for 2,000 years almost, right?
About 2,200.
Oh, even more than that, right? We're in Galut for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And then there was the second temple, which stood for 400 years, 420 years. First temple also stood for 410 years. That's right, 2,800. Right? And then before that, there was another 400 years before the temple. So we're talking about 3,200 years at least. That's what it is. When I saw 1,200, that was way, way short. Way short, right? I made a mistake. So what does that mean? Yoshua bin Nun was here more than 3,000 years ago in this world. He made this decree. So this already became like commonplace, In other words, everybody knew that this is the way it had to be.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? The whole community was doing like that, trespassing and walking on the sidewalk, because it's already like it's everybody knows that that's the way it's done. Nobody even asks a question about that. So comes this guy now, right? Starts jumping over those potholes, making himself look like he's a big tzaddik, he's a big righteous man, he's a pious man.
Yeah.
Jumping over. So why is he jumping over? He wants to avoid walking on the sidewalk. So as if like what? That, well, you know what? Even though Yoshua bin Nun said that you're allowed to walk on the sidewalk, but I'm gonna be more stringent than that. I'm gonna be Hasid, Hasid Shoteh, Debili, So I'm gonna be like that, and I'm gonna walk on the street, jump over the holes. Even though 3,000 years ago I was already allowed to do that, I'm not gonna take that permission. Big Hasid, big Hasid Shoteh. So what happens, right? Not only is it foolish what he's doing, that he's not accepting the decree that was made by Yoshua bin Nun, which was one of the great, sages of all time, Talmid of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's one thing, right? But number two, the audacity of doing this in front of these two rabbis, who are the great rabbis of the generation, Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So what does that mean? In front of them, he's showing them, and they're walking on the sidewalk, you understand? So they're trespassing, but they're allowed to, as we said. So comes this guy in front of them and says, you know what? Shows them like, oh, you guys do trespass, but I don't. I'm like better than you. I'm more righteous than you. I'm more pious, right? That's the way it is.
But they can only assume that that's why he was doing that.
They figured it out. They're not stupid. You know what I mean?
Now, why did one of them tell the other this guy has to be excommunicated from where? From
Good
the
question.
street? I mean,
Right? So yeah, I'll explain to you what that means. That he meant to say that excommunication. What it means is that he's thrown out from the community. He cannot participate in the events of the community, in the public events,
yeah.
in the public ceremonies and so forth. There's all kinds of rules about excommunication. But that's what he felt that he was liable to do to them, because he was showing himself conceit in front of the big rabbis. Like, I'm better than you guys. You guys are lenient and I'm stringent. Understand? That's the whole thing. So,
Keep going, Rabbi.
so what does this mean now? All of a sudden, the story continues, right? The saga continues. So what happens is that Rabbi Chia sees, that Rabbi Danasi is really angry at this guy, he's got a gripe on him. So what does he do? Right away he tells the rabbi, he tells him, oh, no, rabbi, wait. He says, no, I know who this guy is. Don't excommunicate him. I know who he is. Right?
Must be an important person.
So he says, I know who this guy is. This is my Talmid. He's my disciple.
Is it somebody that we know?
Right? So what was this guy's name? His name was Rabbi Yehuda ben Nikosa. That was his name. Nice name. Catchy name, right? So, he says, don't worry, this is my Talmid, so don't do nothing to him. He's okay. What does that mean he's okay? Why is he okay? He's still doing something wrong. By showing himself conceited in front of the rabbis. So therefore, you know what he told him, right? He says, no. He says, don't excommunicate this guy. Don't do that. He doesn't deserve it. Why is that? Because this guy does everything like that. He's like one of those Hasidim. He's pious person. Everything he does, like more than the halakha, more than the law. That's his way. In other words, he's known to be like that. That's the idea. So he told him, don't excommunicate him. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, once he hears that from Rabbi Chia, he comes up to this guy, and he tells him, you're lucky you. He says, if it wasn't for your rabbi who told me not to excommunicate you, I would have excommunicated you on the spot. He tells him like that. This is the Gemara, right? In Bava Kama. Pei Aleph Amud Bet. So the question is, what do we learn from this Gemara? This Gemara is not just a story, The Gemara is not stories, you know what I mean? We learn the laws from these Gemarot, So what do we learn from there? So there are some commentators, who right away jump on this thing, and explain it. There's a little bit of Rashi there. There's Meiri, right? The Meiri explains it very, very well, as usual. The Meiri usually explains the Talmud very, very, very well. Very prolifically. So here also he explains it very, very well. He says that what it means is very simple: that you cannot do something like that in front of people. To show yourself like you're more religious than them, you're more pious than them. If people don't do it and you do it, you know what I mean? So you're looking like you're looking for trouble. So the rabbis made a decree regarding that. When a person behaves this way, he can be excommunicated. What does that mean? That if the rabbi sees him, that he's behaving this way, he can excommunicate him.
But this particular character was left alone.
Right. So also we learn from their halacha, which is that what? There's an exception to the rule, As we said, right, there's a rule, there's an exception to the rule. There always is. Usually that's the way it is. So here also there's an exception. What's the exception? The exception is that if this rabbi, this guy, this disciple, whoever it is, right, is known to be very pious, in general, that's the way he lives his life. he's pious about everything, and he's known, he has a reputation for that. There are some people like this, by the way. Everything they do pious way. Like we had people like this in our generation, We had Baba Sali, we had the Stipler, all kinds of big rabbis like this, who were very super, super pious. Everything they did, machmir, stringent, all the way. So a person like that is okay, he's allowed to do it like that. That's the whole thing, right? So we also learn that. This is also halakha. Okay, very interesting, right? This is what it comes down to. So now the question is, how does this translate into our life today? What does this mean? So the truth is, in the poskim, we have several things that are brought down, the halachot, that we learn from this Gemara. Practical halachot that we apply today as well. I'll tell you like 2 or 3 of them, and you'll understand much, much better what we're talking about, right? Number 1, there is a custom like this, as you know, all Jews, religious Jews, we all put on tefillin. That's the way it is, right? By us, right? So, but the question is, where are you putting tefillin and when are you putting tefillin? That's also a question, right? We talked about this before, right? You're not supposed to put it on the holidays. You're not supposed to put it on Shabbat. You're not supposed to put it at night, the tefillin, only in the daytime. There's all kinds of halachot. But there's also halacha like this, right? That it says in the Ber Hetev, on the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Lamed Vav, and also in the Mishnah Berurah, that a person should not do this also when it comes to tefillin. What does that mean? In public. In other words, a place where they don't put tefillin over there in public, or in that place. Nobody's wearing tefillin. So don't show up there with tefillin, like looking like you're a hotshot. You know what I mean? Nobody's wearing tefillin besides you. So why are you coming with tefillin? Well, you want to be, you want to show yourself that you're more religious than them. That's what it really is, right? So this is forbidden. That's one of the things that we learn about this. You know what I mean?
You know what it reminds me of?
Yeah.
Those yuppies coming back from NYU.
Yeah.
Or like medical school in the subway with the stethoscope.
Oh, stethoscope. Right. They want to have that doctor look, medical look.
Yeah, they don't need to do that. In the subway station. With a stethoscope on.
That's funny. That's funny what you're
neck,
saying. That's funny what you're saying.
And they're going like this. Like they just put in 18 hours, residency,
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. So that's one of the things that we learn, right? The very, very simple halakha. But there's also another one. But this halakha, by the way, before we go to the other ones, it has some ramifications, that need to be discussed. When does this apply? For instance, let's say there's a very, 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 very common case. It happens all the time to people. Sometimes in the morning they wake up very late, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, lazy morning, one of those lazy daisy mornings, right? So that's already too late, right? What does that mean? It's too late to pray Shachrit already. Shachrit time is already over. 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, it's already done. That's it, you're done with that. So what do you do now, right? When do you put on tefillin? So what they do is like this, right? That some people, they wait till they go to shul, at mincha time in the evening, and then they bring their talit and tefillin, and they pray bidcha with talit and tefillin because they didn't do in the morning. Is this the right thing to do according to what we said? It's not the right thing to do, right? Why is that? Because nobody else is wearing tefillin besides you. You're coming in there, standing in front of everybody. And you're putting talit and tefillin, and they're just with their jackets, with their shirts. So it's not right to behave that way. So therefore, a person has to know, right? Because of this halakha that we just discussed, that if this happens to him one time, he woke up late, he didn't pray shachrit, he didn't put on tefillin in the morning, he had to go to work, he had no time, whatever it is, right? So what should he do? When he gets home, let him put on tefillin at home first. Say Kriyat Shema, and say some Divrei Torah, a couple of halachot or something, whatever, a couple of psukim, whatever. Once he does that, he can take off the tefillin, and then come to shul and pray without tefillin. Why? Because in shul, nobody has tefillin in the evening. Nobody has. Understand? So according to this halakha, that's the way it has to be done. There's also another case which is very famous, right? Which is that sometimes, as we discussed already in the past, there's 2 major types of tefillin that people wear. You know, one of them is called Rashi, and the other one is called Rabbeinu Tam. So what's the difference between these two tefillins? On the outside they look the same, but on the inside the order of the parshiot of the chapters is differently ordered. That's the difference, right? And they're both considered to be very, very holy, whatever, and they're both very proper to put both of them on if you can. So a person who's very God-fearing should try to put both, because they're both very widespread in terms of acceptance in halacha. So the point is like this, right? That now he wants to put Rabbeinu Tam, but in the shul that he's praying in, nobody puts Rabbeinu Tam. They all just put Rashi, just like everybody else. Regular people. Your average Joe, he doesn't put Rabbeinu Tam. Whatever Rabbeinu Tam, leave me alone. I'm just a simple Jew. All I do is I put on one tefillin. I don't know what that's called. It's called, for me, it's called tefillin. That's what it's called. I don't know what it's called. Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam. I don't know. I don't think about that. Right? So you come to a shul like that. Everybody puts only one tefillin, and all of a sudden you want to put two. So this is also a problem. Why? Because you're showing to them, oh, you put one, but I put two. I'm more religious than you are. Huh? So therefore, says the Ber Hetev and the Mishnah Berurah, and also they bring many other poskim, responses in halacha, all kinds of things, that a person shouldn't do that. What does that mean? If you want to put Rabbeinu Tam in a place where they don't put over there, so put it at home. Do it at home. Don't bring it to the shul and do it in the shul and show everybody that you're better than everybody else by putting on two.
Have you ever seen anybody do this here? I don't think so.
The truth is, that we have some people who do it. I'm not talking about the simple people. I'm talking about more, the rabbis or the half rabbis. The ones who are almost like rabbis. B'nai Torah. People who are more conscientious about religion. More devout people. But the problem is that when they're doing it in public and nobody else is doing it besides them, so it says over there in the Ber Hetev, the Mishnah Berurah, that not only if he's the only one who's doing that is it prohibited, but even if there's also a couple of other guys, it's also prohibited. What does that mean? Since most people are not doing it, not allowed to do it there.
Do you, by any chance, bother doing that?
What, Rabbeinu Tam?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, our rabbi was very vehement about that. He talked to us about that for quite some time, that we should buy the tefillin of Rabbeinu Tam and put it on, how important it is, and so forth and so on. Of course, every day, yeah, of course.
Oh, wow.
It's considered to be a very big, very big thing, A very big plus, a very big, whatever you want to call it, right? Holy concept. Can you close the door? Thank you.
What?
No, that door, yes. Thank you.
Interesting.
Yes. Thank you so much. Okay, so...
Forgive me, Rabbi. Sometimes I forget the level you're on. Because you talk about these things as though you're just teaching us.
Yeah.
But you yourself personally observe things that...
Well, otherwise...
Your average...
Otherwise, we don't want to be fake news, right? We don't want to be fake news rabbis. Okay, so... Right, as you said. So now, let's continue a little bit regarding this, right? So this also scenario is not going to be good. By the way, the Rabbi Al-Bashal Maran, since he was such a very wise man, he taught us a trick how to do this, to avoid getting caught. What does that mean? He said, if you have let's say the Rabbeinu Tam with you in the shul, and you want to put it on, but you don't want to look like a hot shot, nobody else puts it on besides you, or only a couple of other people. So how do you do it without looking like a hot shot? So he said, you know what, you do like this. He said, take off the tefillin that you're wearing, and go out of the room, pretend like you have to go to the bathroom or something, whatever, and then come back in and put on the Rabbeinu Tam. This way they won't notice. You know what I mean? Because they're going to think, oh, he just went out and then he put on the tefillin again, So they're not going to notice you putting another one. It's not going to be so apparent. So this is the way to the Rabbi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The person who wants to do it this way can do it, right? No problem. As long as he's not showing to people. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you also another interesting thing, which I encountered over here in this community, not in our community, but in 108 over here, this community is over here. That there are some young men here, young boys, who also like to put on tefillin Rabbeinu Tam. Because there are some rabbis who very much stress it, they much encourage that to put it on. But the problem is that according to Sephardi custom, according to what's written in the Chidah, the Chidah writes, one of the big Sephardi poskim, he writes that the minhag of the Sephardim is to put Rabbeinu Tam only when you get married, not before marriage, right? So it's brought down, by the way, this halacha also in the halacha bura. It's brought down also. The Rabbi Maran Abba Shalom, he told us this orally. We heard from him also as well. The minhag of the Sephardim is not to put Rabbeinu Tam until you get married. And even though he says in the book Halichot Olam over there, the Rabbi says Maran Abba Shalom, he writes over there that there's no prohibition for somebody who's not married to put Rabbeinu Tam. There's no prohibition. That's true. There's no prohibition according to halacha. There's no prohibition. But the custom of the Sephardim is not to put. That's the difference, right, between one and the other. Even though he doesn't mention that over there, but he did tell us this orally, and also it's brought down in the Chidah and the Halacha Bura, which is the book of his son. So we see from there that, and also, so it's very clear that, he holds by this, by the way, also the rabbi, practically speaking as well. Why? Because his son told us, Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, the chief rabbi, that in the family of the rabbi, Abba Shalom Maran, they didn't get Rabbeinu Tam until they got married. Like, in other words, that was the way that's the way they practiced as well. Right, so they wouldn't get it when they're bar mitzvah Rabbeinu Tam. They would only get it when they get married, and then the rabbi would have bought them. He bought them as a gift, a wedding gift, tefillin Rabbeinu Tam. So he also held that way, practically speaking, as well. That's the way it was, So what happens like this, right? There are unfortunately some people in this community here who don't listen to these things. When you tell them, they don't listen to you. They say, "What are you talking about?" But it says over here like this, it says over here like that. They don't understand. So what we have to explain to them is like this, right? That if you're putting on Rabbeinu Tam, and you're still not married, and people watch you, and other people don't do it, you're the only one who does it, or there's only one or two other people besides you who do it. It looks like conceit. You looks like Yuhara. This is also a problem. You know what I mean? So that's why a person shouldn't do it, even if he thinks that he's on a level, to put it on, and the custom is not to do it. So if the custom is not to do it, you shouldn't do it. That's it, right? That's the idea, especially in public, because then also you're transgressing the prohibition of Yuhara, of being conceited. This is the idea. So, in order to avoid this, right, a person should try to do everything that the community does. Don't be a hotshot. Don't be conceited. Don't try to be a hasid more than everybody else. I'll tell you a story which is brought down, which Rabbi Mutzafi told us. Al Shalom, Shlita is still alive. I'm not talking about his father. Al Shalom, his father, is already he passed away. But Rabbi Salman Mutzafi. But Rabbi Mutzafi, Rabbi Ben Mutzafi, he told us that he found in the books of the Ben Ish Chai, that it's written over there that him, the Ben Ish Chai, Abba Shalom, and Rabbi Ovadia Somech, who was his rabbi, they used to put tefillin of Shimush HaRabbah, which is a different kind of tefillin. Right? There's Rashi, there's Rabbeinu Tam, and there's the Shimush HaRabbah, which is a different tefillin. It's larger and it's made by different set of standards. It has different halachot, different custom, right? Why do people make this tefillin Shimush HaRabbah? Because there's a midrash called Mishimush HaRabbah. So over there it describes how to make the tefillin in a different way, not like the way that we make it. So what happens is that the Arizal says that it's good to put the Shimush HaRabbah during Mincha time. The proper thing to do is like that. So therefore the Mekubalim, the ones with the Kabbalists, what they do is they put Shimush HaRabbah at Mincha time. But as we said, right, that if nobody else is doing it besides you, or just one or two people, you're not allowed to do it. It makes it looks like you're conceited. So therefore, in order to avoid this problem, what do? They say, right, the Ben Ish Chai writes in his book that he and Rabbi Ovadia Somech, who were the leaders of the community, the great rabbis of the community, they were the Hasidim. They were very pious. You know what I mean? But nevertheless, even though they were very, very pious, but they didn't put Shimush HaRabbah at Mincha time in front of the community, because they didn't want to look like they're being conceited. Even though technically speaking, by then it was allowed to do that. Why is that? Because they are the pious people of the community. They are the Hasidim. They are the leaders of the community. So it really shouldn't be a problem with them. But nevertheless, they were still very, concerned about that, not to look like hotshots. So therefore, what they say, he writes in Ben Ish Chai, they used to go up to the Ezrat Nashim, women's section, and lock the door over there so nobody should see them. And then they would put on Shimush HaRabbah and pray Mincha up there with nobody watching them. So you see that these big chachamim, they were very, very cognizant of that. They were very makpid. They were very particular not to come into the community and do something which looks like you're trying to look more religious than them, more pious than them. That's the idea. By the way, in our generation as well, we saw the great rabbis, of Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, and some of them mekubalim, like Rabbi Tzia Mutzafi, like we mentioned, Shlita, and Rabbi Yaakov Hillel. They came to us several times to bring over their drashot. Also, Rav David Batzi, all the big mekubalim were there. Came to us over there to give drashot.
There now?
His son.
His son took over?
Yeah, in yeshiva there. Yeah. So, as we said, right, that all these big mekubalim used to come, and they used to put, when they were in their place, they used to put Shimush Rabbah at Mincha time, because everybody does it over there. But when they came to us, they wouldn't do that. Why is that? Because they didn't want to look conceited, So they would not put Shimush Rabbah. So you see from there also, by the way, all the mekubalim all today also are very careful about that. They don't do things in front of people which other people don't do, because they understand that this is not the proper behavior.
You have that feeling also?
This is halakha, it's not a matter of feeling. It's a matter, yeah, of course. So, all these big chachamim. Also, same thing, by the way. There's another concept which is similar to that. Some people, what they do is they put two tefillin together. Rashi and Rabbi Tam together. You've seen that, right?
Yeah, I've seen that.
So, in order to do that, you have to make it very small, by the way, because there's not enough room to put two big tefillin on the head. There's not enough room for that.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to make them very, very small, and then you can put both of them on, in the right place. By the way, the Rabbi Maran Alav Shalom, he was against this. Why? Because he said that when you make them very small like that, usually they could be not kosher, because either they're written, in very small letters, and those small letters can be very inaccurate and improperly written, because the sofrim, the scribes, are not used to writing it that way, such small letters like that. And also they could crack, very easily, because they're very thin and they're very flimsy, because they're made very, very small. Because the tefillin is very small, you have to make them very small to put them in there. The compartments are very small, so you have to make them very thin and very flimsy, and they can crack like that. So therefore, the rabbi said, Maran Shalom, he told us several times that he doesn't believe in this system today, to put on like two tefillin together. Even though it says you should do that in the Shulchan Aruch to put them together, but nevertheless today, since it's not possible, since people don't do it the right way, and it can get messed up, right? So you're going to lose more than you gain. So therefore, Maran used to tell us, don't do it this way. But besides that, the fact that it's not practical to do it this way, because of the things that we just mentioned, there's also a problem of Yuhara, of conceit. What does that mean? When you put two in a place where I put only one, you put two together, so you're looking like conceited also. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, well you put one after the other, but I put two together. Oh, I'm better than you. So this is also Yuhara. This is also prohibition. You understand?
Yeah.
So a person who does any of these things regarding the mitzvah of tefillin, he has a problem. Yeah.
When we graduated, I think you didn't graduate with me. I'm 80.
Yeah, I was 1 year behind you. Sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They held the graduation in Queens College.
Oh.
There was a guy, I remember him, sort of a dorky guy. Rabbi, he won every award there was in mathematics and English, and he was going up to the stage, back and forth, basically for art, for drawing, music. The guy was a genius, he was a brilliant student, I'm assuming. I personally didn't know him, I used to see him in the hallways. After a while, the whole assembly over there, everybody just started to boo this guy. They couldn't take it anymore, When you see one guy.
Right. Yeah, it's similar concept. I understand what you're saying.
It's not that he
right.
It
wasn't his fault.
It wasn't his fault.
Yeah.
But he got every award there was in every subject, and after a while, everybody just started booing this guy.
They gave up hope. Daibridin. So, I'll tell you now also that it applies to other things as well, this concept of Yuhara. What does that mean? It's brought down two other things, which we have to discuss. Which is that in the Beretev, in the laws of Shabbat, it's brought down over there that in the name of the Arizal says, who was a Mikveh Kubal, he says that you should put on Shabbat, white clothing. Don't wear like dark clothing, don't wear black. because Shabbat is supposed to be a happy time, it's supposed to be a holy time. So the proper thing is to wear white according to Kabbalah. So what happens is that it says the Beretev, but it says in our times we cannot do that. Why? Because everybody's putting black suits, and blue suits, and you're putting, coming in with a white robe. You know what I mean? So you're looking very, very weird, like conceited. Same thing. So he says because of this rule, Yuhara, conceit, even though it says in the Kabbalah to wear white, but in a place where they don't wear white, they wear black. So you shouldn't do that, right? It's the same idea.
Yeah, but let's say that a person such as yourself, who's, in my opinion, I think on a higher level than everyone else, and everybody already knows that.
Yeah.
You want to put on two tefillins, it's not going to necessarily look out of place.
Right.
Because they expect that from you.
I know what you mean. I understand what you're saying, but the truth is, I would avoid it, and I'll tell you why.
I understand.
I'll tell you why. Because one very simple reason, right? That we're not talking about somebody who keeps the laws. We're talking about somebody who keeps beyond the laws. I mean, there has to be famous for that. There are people like this, who are famous for that. Most people are not famous for this kind of thing. So you need a special kind of person for that. I don't really think that I qualify for that. Through honesty thing. But even beyond that, right? There are people who actually did, like the Ben Ish Chai and Rabbi Obadia Somech, and still they avoided it. Why? Because they didn't want to get involved with this. They didn't want to. Yeah.
What if I decreed that you qualified for it?
So it says in Chazon Ovadia as well. The Rabbi Maran Shalom, he writes, Chelik Shabbat, Chelik Aleph. He says over there that a person should not wear white on Shabbat. Like the Mekubalim they say, like the Arizal. Why is that? Because Yuhara, it looks like you're showing off. You're being a hotshot. So the general rule is like this, right? And here also we can explain a different thing. And one more example I'll give you. Let's say you're going to a place where they're just wearing suits, and you put on a talit, and you put on a talit on your head, and you start praying like with a talit. But nobody else is wearing a talit besides you, So why are you putting a talit? This is also, not a proper thing to do. You pray with your suit, but I have my talit, So you're looking like you're also hotshot, you're conceited. Yuhara. This is also another example, right? So all these three examples that we brought you apply, and also other things apply as well. So a person has to learn from there, right? As a general rule, don't be a hotshot. Don't try to stick out. Don't try to do everything different than everybody else. Be like everybody else, If they come there without tefillin, don't wear tefillin. If they don't wear Rabbeinu Tam over there, don't wear Rabbeinu Tam. If they don't put over there Shimush Rabbah and the Mincha, don't put tefillin on Mincha. If they don't put talit, don't put talit. Whatever it is, right? Whatever they do, you do also. This is the rule, right? You can't go wrong when you behave like everybody else. This is the idea, So a person has to know that. There are, by the way, some exceptions to the rule, as we said, right? There's always exceptions. So as we said, right, that a person who's known to be a Hasid, So who's known to be a Hasid? There are people like Baba Sali, So I'll explain to you why Baba Sali was known to be a Hasid. You understand, right? And then you understand why I don't qualify for that. So Rabbi Sali, the way he would do things is like this, right? He had a rabbi, who was a posek. He wasn't dealing so much with halacha, he was learning Kabbalah more. So what happened was that he would ask his rabbi, okay, what about this? Is it allowed, not allowed? So, if the rabbi would tell him, well, it's allowed, most of the rabbis allow, most of the poskim allow, but some rabbis don't. So even if there was like some rabbis who didn't allow, he wouldn't do it, In other words, he was even concerned about the minority opinion, you know what I mean? Which were usually not. You know what I mean? We don't go that far. Or a single opinion, right? Somebody who's just one guy, one rabbi, against all the world. So Rabbi Sali was concerned about that too. So a person is on that level already, that he's concerned about even one dat yachid, one opinion against everybody else. And he does that in all cases, like in every, that's how he lives his life, like that. He never falters, right? So a person is known to behave like that, like Baba Sali or the Steiper Gaon, that's the kind of person that can behave that way, But, as a rule, by the way, you should know that most people are not like that. Even most people who are like B'nai Torah, they study Torah and they're very proficient in Torah, very knowledgeable. They're not known to be Hasid like that they do everything, in a stringent way. There are some people, by the way, who do something stringent, and they try to show off, they put two tefillin together, and all these things, try to show people how pious they are. But when it comes to other things, they don't even keep the halakha, the basic halakha. because they don't know enough to keep the halacha in all areas of Torah. And that's why, right, the Chazal said, "En amaretz chasid." If you're amaretz, if you're not knowledgeable in halacha, you can't be chasid, because you don't even know how to do that. That's the thing, So when you don't know how to do it, how are you going to do it? You don't know how to.
So I won't be able to infiltrate a very religious community and make believe I want it, right?
Well, there's just a couple of stories came out. I'm not gonna mention. I'll tell you later about that. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you privately what happened over there. Some interesting things, But
About somebody we know? Or?
no, it's not somebody we know. But there were some infiltrations that were done, in the religious community, like you mentioned, right?
By regular schmo?
By missionaries.
Oh.
Missionaries, missionaries, right? They want to convert them to Christianity.
Oh.
Yeah, there were some infiltrations.
Okay. Because there are stories about like guys that want to marry a good religious woman.
Yeah.
And like they disguise themselves as though they're very observant.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, I understand.
And they try to fake their way in.
Sure. Another example, right? I'll finish it off with this, right? Yeah, I know what you mean.
And then the girl's father is looking out the window and sees him walking out of the lobby, and he takes the kippah off.
I'll tell you another example. Yes, I know what you mean. So I'll tell you another example. We'll finish with this, right? That there's also issue regarding, how you learn Torah as well. Don't try to learn Torah in a way that other people don't learn. What does that mean? Everybody else is learning, Gemara and Shulchan Aruch, basic things. And you're learning Kabbalah, you're a Kabbalist you became all of a sudden. What's it to you to learn Kabbalah? And then you come and tell people, oh yeah, I learned Kabbalah, and you tell them, I learned all these things in Kabbalah, showing off, being conceited, again, right, same thing, right?
Decent.
So, again, right, same thing, showing off, idea, I learned this Kabbalah, I learned these books, Kabbalistic books, what's it to you, to learn Kabbalah, again, you're trying to show off, be like a hotshot, when this comes into play, right, into practical use. We're talking about people, most people are keeping a halacha, and saying, okay, what's in the Shulchan Aruch? This guy comes and says, no, I'm keeping what it says in the Zohar Kadosh, I keep like the Zohar, and I keep like the Kitvei Arizal, like what the Arizal says, Rav Chaim Vital, those he wrote over there, Shar Kavanot. What's it to you to tell people, that you do like the Kabbalah, you practice like the Kabbalah, You want to show people that you're conceited, you're better than them, you're more holy than them. You know what I mean? Same idea here. And by the way, this is the biggest problem that we have today. These people who are always talking about Kabbalah center, this center, that center, all kinds of crazy things. Right? So what happens is that they're going above their rank, trying to be somewhere where they don't belong. You know what I mean?
So you don't think Madonna should have learned Kabbalah?
Ask her about it. Okay.
I think these kind of characters, these people, go back since the beginning of time. We probably have characters like this.
Possibly. Yeah. Today we have very special characters.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Like we didn't have before. So I'll tell you, by the way, that regarding Maran, Rabbi Danielov, what was his approach about Kabbalah, right? To understand. We talked about this before a little bit, but just want to reiterate because of this topic that we're talking about, that he himself, the Rabbi Maran Rabbi Shalom, when he was like about 25 years old, already 30 years old, he already knew the Pshat, the Talmud, he knew already by heart. Like microfilm, he had it all in his head. He was scrolling around in his head. Like Talmud, the whole Bible, all the Shulchan Aruch, all Rambam, all these things, all the Poskim. He knew all by heart these things already when he was 25, 30 years old already. He had everything down in his pocket. So what happened was that once he got that stuff down, then he wanted to learn Kabbalah, and it was the proper thing to do. Once you get that stuff down, Mileh Kereso b'Shas Poskim, he fills up his stomach, with learning Shas, Gemara, and Poskim, and the authorities. So then he went and he learned Kabbalah. So who did he go to learn the Kabbalah? Not like these jokers over here, Kabbalah Center, all these kind of people, These businessmen over here we have. We're talking, naming Kabbalah, making money. He went to the real Bekubal, the real Kabbalist. Who was that? Rav Sharabi, right? Rav Mordechai Sharabi, who was a great Kabbalist of this generation. He went to him, and he told him, I want to learn Kabbalah from you. So what happened was that the Rabbi Rav Sharabi already knew him very, very well. They had very close relations. So the Rabbi Shrabi said, welcome, come and learn. So what happened was that he learned 10 years Kabbalah from Rabbi Shrabi, He got the real Kabbalah, not the fake stuff that we have today.
I always wanted to ask you, what is really the Kabbalah? And who wrote this?
This is also from Har Sinai. We got this from Mount Sinai. Yeah, it's part of the Torah. It's esoteric part of the Torah, secrets of the Torah.
Part of the 5 books of Moses.
5 books of Moses is the written Torah. Then we have the oral Torah. You know what I mean? So this is part of the oral Torah. That's what it is. You know what I mean? It's passed on orally. So anyway, the Talmud is also part of that, right? The whole thing. So now, the Rabbi Shalom, he learned for 10 years. He used to go every Friday in the morning. I heard that he also, Chacham Ben Zion Bashol, he used to also go with them together. They were together very friendly. They used to go and they used to learn every day with Rav Shirabi. For 10 years, they picked up the whole Kabbalah. So what happened was that afterwards, once he learned the whole Kabbalah from Rav Shirabi, so then, there was an issue of should he teach it to his disciples? Should he teach it to his sons even? Some of them are big Chachamim, his sons. So the question is, should he teach them or not? So, Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, the chief rabbi, who was his son, told us that every time he would come into the room when the rabbi was there, Baba Shalman, and he was learning some Kabbalistic book, so if you would see him, learning something, once he would see him coming in, he would hide the book, up. Why would he hide it? Because he didn't want to show him that he was learning Kabbalah, he didn't want to teach him Kabbalah. So even though this rabbi, Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, he's the chief rabbi, he's the biggest one of his sons. He's the biggest rabbi out of his sons, biggest chacham. Nevertheless, he didn't feel that he was on the level to learn Kabbalah. Can you imagine?
How old is he?
He's already around 65, 70, right? He's an old man, he's already a senior citizen, right? He's chief rabbi. So we see from there that even somebody like that, the Rabbi Al Shalom, who was himself quite a big chacham, but he didn't feel that he was ready to go into Kabbalah, So all the more so us, right? I'll tell you 2 more things and then we'll end it with that. You understand the approach when it comes to Kabbalah with the Rabbi Al Shalom. That there was also one guy who learned all the seder, all the programs that they have over there to become a rabbi, to become a dayan, to become a judge. So he finished all the programs. He got tested everywhere. So then he comes to the rabbi, and he tells him, asks him, okay, Rabbi, now I finished all the tests. I passed everything. I'm done. I became a dayan. I became a judge. Can I learn Kabbalah now? That's the question. So it was a good question. I mean, apparently it was a proper question to ask him. So what did the rabbi tell him? He told him, I think you need some, maybe go to the drugstore and get some pills, because you need some medicine. Right? Why did he tell him that? Because even though he finished all the tests and he got tested, but doesn't mean when you finish all these tests that now you know all the whole Torah. You still have a lot of things you didn't learn. These tests, what it is that they memorize things, from this book, that book, some books, and then they go in to take a test and they memorize and they pass a test. Doesn't mean that they learned everything. You know what I mean? That's not the way it is. So a person has to know, just because you pass some tests, and became a rabbi and became a dayan, doesn't mean now you're on the level to learn Kabbalah. It doesn't necessarily mean that. You have to learn all the material, everything. The whole Talmud, right? All the Mishnayot, all the Gemarot, Rashi, Tosfot, right? Marsha, Shulchan Aruch, Bet Yosef, right? Kesef Mishnah, all these good, all things, Rambam, all things that the person has to learn. So, right, I'll tell you another thing, right? Which is that Rav Sasson, who was my friend in Yechavedat, when we learned in the rabbi's yeshiva, he was a grandson of the rabbi. He's the grandson of the rabbi. He lives in Bet Shemesh, very nice guy, right? So Rav Sasson, he went to ask the rabbi. He used to go and talk to the rabbi. The rabbi used to like to have him over. His grandson, have some fun with him, whatever. So he went over one time and he asked him. He said, "Okay, Rabbi, I'm going to go and tell now the students at Yechavedat, the yeshiva, what do you feel about learning Kabbalah? Do you want them to learn or not?" So, what the rabbi told him, and he told us this, right? He related to us this. The rabbi told him, he says, tell the students like this. He said, whoever is going in my ways, is my disciple, don't learn Kabbalah. So he told him. Right? So you see from there, by the way, that a person has to be very, very special and gifted to learn Kabbalah. So therefore, the people who are the common folk, the Ameratzot, should not be, talking about these things, Kabbalah and learning Kabbalah and all these kinds of things. This is also Yuhara, this is also arrogance, it's conceit. When a person behaves this way, tries to get ahead of himself, to go somewhere where he doesn't belong. The Gaon of Vilna, by the way, he writes about this. One of the great rabbis from 250 years ago says the Gaon of Vilna that when a person tries to get ahead of himself and go to a place where he doesn't belong, he's not high enough to be in that place, and tries to stand there, and tries to establish himself in that place, they punish him for that. Why is that? Because why are you going to a place where you don't belong? You don't belong there. It's not your place. Wait till you get there. Maybe one day you will. So you have to be patient. That's the idea. Okay, Baruch Adonai leolam, amen ve'amen. Chazak u'baruch. Be blessed with health, wealth, and happiness. Good life, happiness, and shiduchim, b'ezrat Hashem. Good zivug. Whoever needs to get married, refuah shlema. Whoever needs refuah shlema. Amen ve'amen. Chazak u'baruch.